Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs podcast with James Henderson.
Hello, and it's another episode of Hospopreneurs Plus. This puts us at 145. So as you know, Hospopreneurs Plus is a little different. The episode today includes 4 different interviews from GABS in Sydney. So it's the great Australasian beer SpecTAPular, who put us up for the event, which was fantastic to attend. And what was even better was learning about what's happening in the Australian craft beer industry. You're going to hear 4 separate interviews today. So the first interview is with Brennan, the founder of non-alcoholic brewery Heaps Normal. I really enjoyed their quiet XPA and can wholeheartedly say that it tasted like a real beer. I was pleasantly surprised by it. The second interview is with Clay and Monty from One Drop, who are continuing to push the boundaries of what beer is. They gave us a little taste of their glitter beer and beer ice cream. I highly recommend you check these guys out. Third was Dave Ward, the sales manager at 2-time GABS Hottest 100 winning brewery Bent Spoke. Bent Spoke's actually won the GABS Hottest 100, which is a People's Choice competition 2 years in a row now, so this year and last year. And finally, you'll hear from a panel on Sydney's northern beaches and what's really driving the recent explosion of interest there. On that panel, we've got Mike from Seventh Day Brewery, Dave from Dad and Dave's, Johnny from Freshwater Brewing Co., and Tony from Bucketty's. I really enjoyed attending GABS in Sydney, and I'm excited to share this episode with you today, so let's crack in there.
Peter, thank you very much for sitting down with me today. As you know, the first question that I like to ask on the main program, the Hospopreneurs podcast, is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. I'd love to know if you have something for us today here at GABS.
We had a funny story. We had one of our sales reps go in to a pub in Melbourne and kind of cracked a can, and the publican had a drink and had a sip and said, "Oh, it's delicious." And then while he was taking the second sip, our sales rep said, "Oh, it's non-alcoholic," and he spat it out on the floor and told him to get out of the pub, which we thought was a funny one. There's a few of those as well.
Yeah, wow. I like that. Thanks for that, Peter. What is it that makes you get up every day and do the things that you do?
Yeah, probably worth mentioning my background. Like I said to you kind of before we started recording, my dad was a pretty abusive alcoholic. I lost him to suicide when I was 11. Grew up in the shadow of that, since then. I'm 41 now, so it's been a long time of trying to figure that one out as a young man. And I guess realizing that there is a problem in how we consume alcohol. Our mission as a business is to change drinking culture. We say that we make beer for people who really love beer but want to cut down, and that could be you want to drive for the night, or you're taking a month off the booze, or you're sober for life, or any kind of mix of those 3 things, anything in between really. So, and we also make beer for people who really enjoy beer but just want to, cut down. So yeah, in terms of purpose and why, like our mission as a business is, like I said, is to change drinking culture. But for me personally, it's just those stories. You'd be shocked how many people hit us up on Instagram, DMs, and hit me up on LinkedIn and just say, hey, my dad used to drink a lot, or my husband used to drink a lot, and now he's discovered Heaps Normal, and we're having more meaningful conversations, and he's stopped being so angry, and he's realized that he's got a problem, or she for that matter. And those are the things for me that, when it's midnight and you're trying to put a presentation together for a meeting the next day through one eye and you want to go to bed, those are the things that really, make me kind of push through to the get stuff done.
It must be difficult to be giving that to the public, these sorts of personal stories about yourself. How did you navigate that to begin with? Were you very open about those sorts of things, or is it something that's evolved over time?
Yeah, I wasn't at all. I was really shy and embarrassed of it growing up, I think, as a teenager and in my 20s and even into my 30s. And then realized I had a problem with alcohol as well. I was always that guy that would go out and have so much fun and then couldn't remember how I got home the next day. And then, I'd phone my friends up and say, oh, we had fun. And they said, no, you were out of control and you did this and you did that, and was always really embarrassed about that. So, I think, a few years ago, I started actually talking about it a bit more and went and had some therapy around it, and just realized like it's nothing for me to be ashamed of, but it's, you know, the more I share that, people seem to resonate with it, and people have their own versions of that story too. And I think the more we can talk about these things, the more we can get it out in the open, the better it is for everybody, and it takes a bit of the shame away, you know, because I think a lot of people have unhealthy relationships with alcohol. So let's talk about it more.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me, and I'm sure listeners all appreciate hearing it on the episode today. The story that you told me, the crazy hospitality story earlier, was about actually really good tasting beer that someone couldn't believe was actually non-alcoholic. How do you make it taste so good?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the interesting thing is non-alcoholic beer has been around since the 70s. It's not new.
Is that the Claytons? Is that right?
Yeah, there's a few of them back in the day, particularly in Germany. So, you know, I think the problem was there's two main ways to make non-alcoholic beer. One is kind of vacuum distillation. The other is more of a reverse osmosis. But both of those methods, you end up extracting the alcohol out after the brewing process. The problem with that is it takes a lot of the flavor out. It's what gives non-alc beer a bad rep, because they're kind of, a lot of them are quite watery and kind of not full flavored. What we've done, we spent a lot of time really innovating on the yeast that we use. So we use pretty much a very, very same process as normal beer. We just use a yeast that micro ferments to just under 0.5%. Anything under 0.5% is classified as non-alcoholic. Kombucha has 0.5% alcohol. Orange juice left in the fridge can have up to 0.5%. Ripe banana, bread that's been on the shelf for a few days. So what we've done is kind of not had to take anything out because we leave everything in, and the result is a full flavored beer that genuinely makes people think it's a normal beer. You know, we did a lot of taste tests early on when we were still in the prototype proof of concept stage, where we go to sommeliers and restaurateurs and go, hey, you know, here's a blank silver can, have a blind taste and let us know what you think. And they would name the flavor profiles. They would then say it's probably about a 4.5%, and we'd say it's non-alcoholic, and jaws would hit the floor and they couldn't quite believe it. So I think that was the moment for us to go, okay, we're onto something, and let's build out Heaps Normal.
And to grow into the company, the entity that you are today, I know you've gone through some programs, you've been backed by a VC. Before we started recording, we had a chat about a couple of those with Startmate and Blackbird. Now, Blackbird's been on the show previously for listeners. To link that in with your previous answer, did they help in the process of iterating that product, or was it more to commercialize it and grow?
Yeah, so the product we kind of did between us as co-founders. There's 4 of us as co-founders, myself, Andy Miller, Benny Holdstock, and Geordie Smith, and the 4 of us worked together to kind of get the beer right and get the brand right. I think we were super, super fortunate to get accepted into Startmate, which is an accelerator program run by Blackbird Ventures, as you know. And, you know, it's a 12-week process that essentially teaches you how to run a company. So how to run a meeting efficiently, how to do sales and marketing properly, all these things that you think you know, but then you're getting kind of taught by these mentors that are very established entrepreneurs themselves, who've grown businesses from scratch and turned them into multi-million, some even a couple of $1 billion businesses. So getting that kind of mentorship firsthand was pivotal to us. It really made such a big difference for us as we kind of launched. And then off the back of that, they do a thing called Demo Day, which is essentially, imagine Shark Tank, Dragon's Den. You go up on stage and you kind of pitch your idea. We raised $1.3 million off the back of that. And then we did another, I think, $8.5 million in November, just gone, with pretty much the same investor group as the first round. So we've got some incredible people like Kate Morris from Adore Beauty. We've got Danny Millen from Koala and Milk Run. We've got Simon Griffiths from Who Gives a Crap. Some really kind of established entrepreneurs who have built businesses, like I said, from nothing, that are now, you know, kind of in our corner, putting their money where their mouth is, but also giving us that advice and mentorship of how to grow a company. So I think without that, we definitely wouldn't be where we are today.
Well, thank you very much for joining me for this little snippet on the program today. It's been a pleasure having you in.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks, mate.
Hello and welcome, Monty and Clay. It's a pleasure to have you here, gents, for just a quick little chat today at GABS. I'm interested to know from each of you, Monty and Clay, what is it that really drives you? Why do you do what you do?
I guess from a sales point of view, I always wanted to get back into small business and be able to help and create a strategy from the ground up. And I think working with a team at One Drop that's passionate, small, dedicated, hardworking, but also we've got creative control. We can do anything and experiment and push the boundaries.
Different for you, Clay?
No, that's definitely the underlying core value is creativity within the business, and just allowing everyone to put in their best, and then we can all work from there. So it's definitely a creative outlet for each and every person who works with One Drop.
And it makes sense that theme of creativity really does come out, given that you released well over 100 beers last year. You must be doing so many different things. How then do you foster that sort of creativity within the team?
It's the encouragement, right? Like, don't get me wrong, like things can be created on the fly, like a couple of days out. Like Nick might be like, oh, we need a beer. I don't know what to do. And it'll be beetroot, raspberry, and then he'll go marshmallow, truffle salt. So things can happen pretty like spontaneously. And then there's other stuff that's very well planned out and executed.
And on the tasting notes that you just described there, it sort of brings us to one of your beers I've been hearing a lot about, the glitter beer. What sort of led you to make a glitter beer?
I think probably comes down to experience and giving the consumer something different. Not necessarily something that wanted to talk about all the time. It's more, let's see what we can do. Let's add glitter to a beer with a bunch of marshmallows and strawberries and red plums and dragon fruit. See what the punch is like.
Yeah.
So I've not had this beer yet. Do you literally put glitter in it, or?
Yeah, so we've got edible glitter, and we've dosed the kegs and the soon-to-be released cans.
We're getting some nods around the room off the mic about this one. Can you tell me a bit more about what you're sort of seeing as the future of beer innovation?
Well, I think we've got much better access to different ingredients than we've ever had before. I was so fortunate to live in Australia where you get so much fresh fruit. We thrive on fruited sours as well as hazies and dark beers. And I think when you look at the flavour combinations with what you can get, we'll always use fresh. Then, depending on the season as well, even down to the hops. So getting fresh hops from New Zealand, flown over within a couple of days of being ready for chucking in the beer. And then also access to American hops as well.
What about changing supply chains recently? There must be a lot going on that's affecting your ability to get these sorts of input products. Are you just using things locally then?
We probably use a lot more locally, and we try and use as much locally as possible. So that definitely helps. But prices have gone up everywhere. Like, it's just one of those things. So eventually the beer prices will go up.
Just want to thank you both for joining me on this today's very interesting and different episode of Hospopreneurs. So thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
Hello and welcome, Dave. Thank you very much for joining me for this little snippet of a very different Hospopreneurs episode from GABS in Sydney. The first question that I normally ask on the program is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. And you've smiled while I've asked the questions. I'm very interested in maybe what you might have. It looks like you've got something for me today.
I've got a few, a lot of them around some of the breweries or small breweries around Sydney and down in Canberra where we're from. Something stands out to me in particular back at Four Pines back in the day before they were independent. I was working for a brewery at the time and I was with the owner of the brewery. Went into the bar, they had no idea who we were. Random bartender behind the bar gave us a full spiel, 11 in the morning, for all of their beers. Really just amazing customer experience and service. And then he finished off at the end with, and if you don't like any of those beers, F off to Wharf Bar over the road and get a Corona. It really stuck with me at 11 in the morning.
Wow.
It was a great experience. The beers were good, and it's always stuck with me.
Wow. Has that, I love that one. Has that shaped the way that you sell beer?
No, not at all. not at all, but it does make you think that, people who are drinking beers like ours, independent family-owned businesses, they're drinking for experiences. And sometimes that's not just with a liquid. One of our vision statement is world-class beer experiences, and that's at a beer festival like GABS just down the road, or whether you're getting a crankshaft at a bottle shop around the corner, or on tap at the Quarryman's Hotel. So Bensberg Brewing is founded in 2014 by Richard Watkins and Tracy Margrain. If you've been in the beer industry in Australia for the last 20 years, you'd be familiar with Richard Watkins. He was at one point, he brewed the Wigan Pen in Canberra, which was one of 6 little breweries in Australia back then. He's been brewing since 1994, and You could argue it over a beer, but we think he's Australia's longest serving continuous brewer, still on the tools, still brewing. And his partner Tracy brews at our venue in Brennan, which is kind of the city centre almost of Canberra. She brews all of our beers there. And Richard kind of looks after and brews all our beers at the Cannery, which is our large production brewery in the suburbs of Canberra.
I'm interested to know, Dave, if we look at why you do what you do, what sits behind the work that you do now?
It's a good question. You ask most of my friends, it's because I love a beer. But, it's a very passionate industry. There's 650 small to medium-sized independent breweries in Australia. That's a lot of jobs. It's about good ingredients, good people. There's a room down there with probably 150 brewers that don't know each other, all having a great time. Who knows what's going to happen in the future of the industry, but since I've been in it over the last 15 years, it's definitely been a rising tide lifts all boats. Everyone working together, and it's that kind of collegiate mentality, and it's all about good beer, and the quality of that beer over the period that I've been in the industry has just grown and grown and grown. It's pretty hard to get a bad beer these days, and I think not only is that good for the consumer, it's good for us because we're bringing people on this journey from not bad beers, but big, large macro beers. We're bringing people across to these smaller independent breweries that, an extra hop here or there for, if you're doing hundreds of millions of litres of beer is a big difference. But for us, we want, that is our point of difference.
You won, this is your second year winning GABS Hottest 100, which is obviously 100 beers, but there are a number more that enter. How do you win that and then win it twice? What is required to actually do that?
The people of Canberra really love and support our beer. Richard's, as I was saying before, he's brewed in Canberra for a long time. It's a bit of an identity, Richard and Trace. And people are really passionate about not only the quality of the product, but I suppose the Canberra business, and they want to see people going well. So that's probably the most important thing. And apart from that, our beer Crankshaft, it's a really nice beer. It's got all the flavour you want, but it almost drinks like a pale ale. And when you put it in front of them, and we've worked pretty hard to put it in front of people over the last few years, and those things all combine together. And I think that's probably why we've won. But it's a tough spot to keep because there's some amazing beers and amazing competition. We're pretty proud to have won it twice. Puts us in rare company with people like Bolter and Stone and Wood. Who knows what will happen next year, but there's plenty of good beers that could win, and they never release how close you were, but I can't imagine there was too many votes in it.
On that, you mentioned the good company that you're in there with Stone and Wood and with Bolter. You can allude to some sort of trajectory that might be on the cards for Ben Spoke, and you don't have to comment on that one today.
I'd be happy to comment if you like.
What's in the future then for you, Dave?
I think there's lots in the future for us, but if you have a beer with Richard Watkins or Tracy Margrain, you'll pretty quickly realise that's not the plan for Ben Spoke. We're all about making good beer, and they're very, very passionate about staying independent.
I respect your answer, Dave. Having said that, I did also interview Jamie Cook a number of episodes ago, and for listeners, Jamie Cook was the founder, or remains to be in history, the founder of Stone and Wood. He said the same thing when we sat down, and they ended up selling. But let's not elaborate on that one. I want to thank you very much for joining me for this little snippet on the show today, Dave. Really appreciate your time, and I'm very excited to try Crankshaft.
Cheers, thanks mate, let's have one.
Hello and welcome, gents. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with me today for this different Hospopreneurs episode. Appreciate you joining me. I wanted to ask firstly, for this little segment on the show, I've asked everyone else before you, but we've got 4 guests. I've never had 4 guests ever to sit down in the same room, but I'm going to ask the same first 2 questions that I ask on every episode. And the first is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. Whoever would like to take this first.
I remember going and sitting outside and having a cigarette when I used to smoke, and looking in and seeing all the people having a good time and laughing and the music, and I was just like, damn, we made that, right? That was us. And that was such a moment, like it blew my mind.
I'm Dave from Dad and Dave's. I used to be so scared of doing that front of house, that face-to-face with customers and things like that. And it wasn't until I did the Rocks Beer Festival when we first started that I really found my voice and how to talk to people, and serving the beers, getting that instant gratification of you pour the beer, they drink it, they sip it, they go, hey, that's great. It really just helped kind of grew the confidence and the love of the industry.
That's right. That instant gratification that you talk about when you pour somebody a beer and you know that they're enjoying it and they're going to sit as a group and that's going to bond them closer, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm interested, maybe Tony, Johnny, I'd love to know what really sits behind your brand and what really drives your respective brands.
Go ahead, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it's Johnny. I had a Pilsner Urquell probably about 15 years ago. That was like a moment. I was doing the advertising for Pilsner Urquell, a Czech Pilsner, which has sort of defined everything that kind of where we're at now as Freshie. And as I've kind of worked in marketing in other breweries, again, you're an influencer rather than a decision maker. And at some stage you go, I just want to do this for myself. And I'm a home brewer as well. So it's like the marketing home brewer. So you're brewing a load of beers on the side and trying to perfect a recipe. And the trigger moment was just, I think I can do this the way I want to do it. And like I'd brewed a beer that I was super stoked with. I knew what the design looked like. I just think like the tick boxes were just there, and it was a now or never moment where you say to your wife, do you mind? Where are we going with this?
I think we've all got tolerant wives. I think that's what unites. So.
Yeah, and it's like, because when it comes down to a craft scenario, is that, it's beg, steal and borrow. You sort of figure that stuff out, and you may, call it entrepreneurial, call it whatever you want, where you go, I've got this thing that I need to achieve. I don't want to die wondering.
Tony, a bit about your why and what really drives you, a bit about maybe even the brand. Tony's just cracked us a beer.
Yeah,
thanks for that, Tony. I mean, it could be any beer right now, but tell me more about your beer and the why behind your brand.
Yeah, so for me, this was a late in life, like midlife crisis, career change. I was a network engineer for 25 years, and I was never a home brewer. Just got sick of the commute to Sydney and said I want to do something different. And I grew up in the U.S. West Coast in the 80s and 90s when craft brewing was really starting to take off. And I said, I'm going to become a brewer. And it's a lot of study, a lot of hit and miss, trial brews, and became a home brewer as I decided to do this thing. But just wanted to make really good beer, the beers that I grew up with. And then I was approached to work at Bucketty's. And I thought, what a great opportunity to build a brewery from the ground up. And Nick McDonald, the owner, had this vision of just a great place for families and friends and everyone to come and drink really nice beer and have a chat and just good times factory. And I think that's what we've created there.
On the note of good beer as well, you're all brewing in the same region. What is actually happening in the Northern Beaches and why are people attracted to the area? What's different? There's so many questions there. It's like a triple barrel question I've got for you. Tell me more firstly about the Northern Beaches and what makes it a great place to be brewing.
I think fundamentally it's a lifestyle place. So I know I moved there. I come from the UK, living in London, it's hectic, make a lot of money, spend a lot of money. You move to somewhere like the Northern Beaches, things slow down, it's a cooler environment, everybody's very friendly. Like when I first arrived, I was unnerved by how Australians would kind of ask me how I am and interact with me. And in London, you'd be like, that guy's a weirdo, right? But everybody does it here. So you're like, oh, wow, maybe that's a thing. Maybe people are actually nice to each other, right? And that kind of vibe passes through, I think, right? It's a lifestyle thing. And that plus the fact that I think a lot of the big bars and hotels and things are tied up in contract sort of taps. There's actually a demand for craft beer that's being unanswered. And so when you create something like that, it immediately becomes popular because there's already a demand there. And those guys have kind of ignored it or tried to push it out of the way for that long that actually when you create it, people like independent, they like small, they like to be able to kind of interact with the owner and the brewer and the staff and stuff. And it's not a hotel or a RSL or whatever. And so there's an authenticity to it that perhaps those guys don't have.
And I think because they call it the Insular Peninsula, right? There's a lot of great local support. Like the locals and all of the northern beaches support us all really. Like, it's fantastic.
You say peninsula? I thought it was an island.
It seems like it is sometimes.
But it shifts quickly as well. I mean, like Dave, you've been around the longest, but I think the Four Pines story is that, you know, those guys were in WA and they were looking to get some good beer. They're from WA, where Little Creatures is very well established, and it almost was part of the culture of Fremantle and that kind of thing. They came over to the Northern Beach and like, where do we get good beer? And it's like, there isn't anywhere. And that the culture there was like this, and the culture before Four Pines was a bit of a desert for good quality beer.
Yeah. Well, when we started, you used to be able to walk into a bottle shop and go, hey, I've got craft beer. They're going like, I've got people asking about that. Like, what do you have? And it's instantly like, I've got, like, we used to load up the car with 20, 30 cases at a time, just drive into a random bottle shop and go, hey, we've got craft beer. And they're like, great, how do we get some? Do that. And we're like, I got it in the back. We can put 5 cases on your floor right now and give me your email address. I'll send you an invoice later. And they were stoked. A couple of days, they're calling up like, let's go again. And it was massive. But the change over the past few years with the growth of all the different craft brands and stuff like that, we're a small family little business. We grew the business organically compared to Four Pines, which had a bit of money behind them and doing that. But the growth of the whole sector has just gone through the roof. But we're actually seeing more demand for good craft beer, but it's not necessarily walk into a bottle shop anymore and drop off stuff. It's a little bit harder to sell, but we're kind of moving the same amount, but in a wider network than before.
I want to quickly ask, because we have mentioned craft beer a lot in all these answers, and obviously we're at a craft beer festival. The number one question is, what is craft beer, right?
I'm answering that.
And so Tony says
it's a really good book about it,
right? Yeah. Says he's not going to answer that. So, are any of you willing to try to answer the question?
For me, craft is, it's about being independent. Essentially, it's about being small and nimble, and being able to produce a lot of, beer doesn't travel well, doesn't age well. It's, people buy imported beer because they think it's great, but actually it's sat in a container at 40 degrees across the equator. It's not good for the beer. If you make it locally and, it's super fresh and it's good, people will come and they'll really enjoy it, right? And they get it. So I think it's sort of about that, really. And, we get our grain from a family company. We try to get our hops from this region. It's about keeping your carbon footprint down, making it, not just being a factory, right? And for that, we can make a lot of different beers quickly, right? Because we've got small tanks, so we can come up with a new beer and put it on and see if people like it. And
it's not a push-button factory. Push-button brewery.
Correct, right. Yeah. And my brewery especially is really manual. Just because I don't want anything to break, basically. It's either me or the... Or there's no automation. If I break it all goes down, right? Or Kobe.
Yeah. So in that and the last couple of answers, and particularly from you, Mike, that sense of supporting local businesses, and we're talking about the Northern Beaches and getting nods all around the table here. That's certainly something that really resonates, and it has become more common in the sort of the public discourse that everything is, local, sustainable. That's the sort of conversation that everyone's having. What is it that you think is actually driving that, and how is beer going to change as a result of these factors or forces?
I personally think it's past 2 years with COVID and everything that's gone on. There's a lot of instances of large companies stood down staff straight away, heart and soul being ripped out of the community. But then you have a lot of small business which are battling. and they're battling to keep their staff on because, you have owners about the business who care about their business, but they also care about their staff because you're small business, you got 20, 30 staff, and your staff are your family. You work with them every day. You really push that. So over the past couple of years, I really think the drive has turned to we must support our local because our local supports us.
And that's the thing on a macro scale is that, Australia hasn't had a recession for a long period of time. That happened. Then there's COVID. And so people change their behaviour. There's obviously also a climate conversation that's going on. And so people choose where they're buying their coffee, where they're buying their bread, and they want to have a meaningful interaction. Where if they're going to part their money with some, to buy beer, they want to have that sense of story. And it's a dialogue rather than a transaction. And I think that's the big thing. And you'll see, that's why there are these communities popping up all over Australia, all over the world, where Northern Beaches is the next one that's happening in Sydney. But it's the same why Marrickville is happening. It's because there's it's a two-way story. It interacts. People feel like they're supporting their local brewery, coffee shop, whatever it might be. And it's also reciprocating because the brewery loves having those locals and loves being able to invite them back in, what you're saying with you guys. 100%. It's like having your locals come in. How fantastic is that?
I mean, we sponsor local teams. We're involved with the community much more than a big kind of multinational would be. And it's that flexibility, that kind of dexterity, is that the right word? To be able to just, these guys come in and they say, hey, look, we've got a little team. Can you guys provide the shirts? Yeah, sure, right? You guys come and drink here, we'll provide you shirts. You can't reach somebody in a big company like that, right? So there's that feedback to the community, which I think is so important.
Gents, I'm going to call it because we're going to have to start the next session of GABS. So for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap it up. But I really appreciate you joining me for the conversation here around the Northern Beaches. So thank you very much, Tony, Dave, Johnny, and Mike for joining me today.
Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
This program is hosted by James Henderson. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan and Shim Phelan. Thanks to our distribution team, and a special thanks to you for tuning in every week. This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.